Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. My name is Bonnie, my pronouns are they, them, and I'm the poetry event coordinator here at Brookline Booksmith. Today it is, of course, my pleasure to host two amazing poets, Daniel Tobin and Marc Vincenz, for our Third Thursday's Poetry Reading Series. Before I do introductions, just a few housekeeping notes to get out of the way. Firstly, copies of these two incredible poetry collections that you see here are available for sale at that back counter over there. The event will be followed by a signing, so you can go pick up your copy and get it signed by the poets right here. I encourage you to support their work in whatever way you can, whether that means buying a book, complimenting them here at this reading, or following their work online. Secondly, please keep your phones off or on silent for the duration of the reading, and thank you for being a considerate audience member. Please know as well that the event is being live streamed on our little contraption right here. Hello to YouTube. Our audience members shouldn't be visible to the YouTube viewers, but if you don't want to be live on YouTube, just like don't stand right in front of it, and you'll be okay. And finally, we will have a Q&A at the end of the event, so hold your questions until the end, but definitely have them ready to go. This event is part of a monthly reading series that takes place on the third Thursday of each month here at Brookline Booksmith. However, we won't have a third Thursday in December due to, well, there'll be a third Thursday, but not a poetry reading, due to the holidays. But we do have one more poetry event at the end of this month on the 30th. So if you are interested in catching some more poetry before our holiday break, feel free to join us there, and you can check that out on our website. Our January 3rd Thursday's poetry event will also be listed on the website soon, so definitely keep an eye out for that as well. And now for the fun part, introductions. Marc Vincenz is an Anglo-Swiss-American poet, fiction writer, translator, editor, musician, and artist, multi-hyphenate. He has published over 30 books of poetry, fiction, and translation. Most recently, A Splash of Cave Paint and The Pearl Diver of Irunmani, which we'll hear from tonight. A translator from German, Romanian, and French, Marc's most recent translated title is An Audible Blue, by award-winning Swiss poet and novelist Klaus Meurs, which recently won the Massachusetts Book Award. So congratulations. His work has been published in many venues, including The Nation, Plowshares, Evergreen Review, World Literature Today, and the Los Angeles Review of Books. Marc is an editor and publisher of Mad Hat Press and a publisher of New American Writing. Born in Hong Kong, he's lived all over the world, but now resides in Western Mass with his family. And of course, Daniel Tobin is the author of 9 books of poems, most recently Blood Labors, named one of the best poetry books of the year in 2018 by the New York Times and the Washington Independent Review of Books, and the newly published The Mansions, which of course we'll be hearing some work from tonight. His poetry has won many awards, among them the Massachusetts Book Award, the Julia Ward Howe Award, and fellowships from the NEA and Guggenheim Foundation. His poems have appeared nationally and internationally in such journals as The Nation, The New Republic, the Harvard Review, Poetry, and the Paris Review, among many others. His work has been anthologized in Hammer and Blaze, the Breadloaf Anthology of New American Poets, the Norton Introduction to Poetry, and elsewhere. Daniel is also an editor and essay writer and has published numerous essays and edited anthologies on modern and contemporary poetry in the United States and abroad. He teaches at Emerson College here in Boston. We're so excited to have you both here to share your work. Everyone, please give a warm welcome to Marc and Daniel.
It's great to be here. Can you all hear me? Oh, good. It's a pleasure to be reading with Marc and Bonnie. Thank you for those introductions, and thank you all for being here. I'm going to be reading from The Mansions. I'll just say a very brief thing about it. It's a fairly chunky book, as you can see, as poetry books go, and it is actually 3 books in one. It's a trilogy of book-length poems. And I've been reading across all 3, but tonight I'm just going to read from one of them. The first book is called From Nothing, and that's on the life of Georges Lemaitre, who is a physicist and a Jesuit priest. The second book is on Simone Weil, who is the great social justice advocate, philosopher, and mystic. And And the last book, which is the one I'm going to be reading from tonight, is called At the Grave of Teilhard de Chardin. Teilhard de Chardin was also a scientist and a Jesuit priest, and he was born in 1881 and lived to 1955. So I'm going to be reading sections. So these aren't necessarily individual poems, but they're sections of the poem At the Grave of Teilhard de Chardin. The first section is called As in a Vivid Sleep, and I'll read a couple of these, or a few of these. And these are all in the voice of inanimate objects or events in the world. And it begins with a little epigraph from the prophet Isaiah, which is, "Let the inhabitants of the rock sing." So these are voiced from non-human characters, so to speak. The first is his gravestone talking, and it's called His Stone. Again, this dawn lit incandescence through the yew trees, and down the slope, the river scrolling the length of itself in every pearl and ripple. When years ago they set me to attest his life among the growing human increase under grass, I had long been lifted from the ground mass, soft-grained, sun-blanched, vaguely crystalline, his name cut into me plainly with his beginning and his end. And the frozen earth unwilling to lay him to his rest, for this man to sleep the sleep of trust, the sleep of seed in the winter field. It is a terrifying thing to be born, to find oneself without having willed it, swept along, still, I hear him say, on a torrent of fearful energy. Or maybe I only think I hear him as if I were his god of iron, a childhood's distant dream, infinitely durable, not my weathering granite shield against effacement. What comes at the very end, he said, is the adorable. To this padlocked field behind the shuttered church, I watched them swing the gate and scan the identical rows along the tarred path, pillowed by decades of moss, until they find me, each one leaving their gift of stone on my crest. And sometimes it is in that stillness as if I am the river moving along with the layers, light pouring over me, pouring through me, light speeding from so far away, it has no past or future. This next section is called Wake, and it's the wake of a boat. Don't you sometimes, when you're riding on a boat, hear the wake talking to you? Just you. Wakes. If, as Plato dreamed, time is just a moving image of eternity, am I not then the glittering, trailing ripple of a world line through matter passing on ahead? Or imagine, if you will, my life on this coarser scale, the character of a quantum riptide behind the stern, bubbling into being through this fluid interference of currents that become a gulf, this sea called red, where the scientist, this priest, follows on his exodus between Sinai and the Nile, an array of fossil bones where the Holy Family made their timorous flight into the desert, its shifting rush of saffron, a startle of snipes from the tamarinds, spray of mimosa. Then, as now, a sudden heron skimming the shore's milky wash, nets of fishermen seizing the moment as I would fold everything gathered into my present. Not far below, hawksbills cruise the underwaves. Cordata roam the glass-strung cathedrals of reefs that are venerable as sacred cities, mineral, animal, living and dead, releasing a blizzard of softest flesh to dwarf the work of Giza above, these architects more ancient than any peddled upstart. But blindly, matter, spirit, two aspects of the one stuff this priest supposed, and mind and harness all the way down. Still, gunshots like popped bread on the Sphinx's face. Current. In this river's perpetual haste, I am already always arrived, always already departed, the constant wanderer among the hosts of different worlds, arrow and mark, the course through which I make things to make themselves, everything irreversible, the syntax in the enzyme's shape, the atom's charges composing from within into a grammar of things, autocatalysis of particle into molecule into cell, until the eyes form the way swirls form in water, patterns risen out of patterns, until the patterns desire to know. This sweeping out of savannas over continents, across steppes, their driven waves, attests the spur, my own long indigent venture on. Take this one with its hit box, his tools, the pressed moons of bread he keeps to offer mass. He's shuffled from Auburn to Egypt, Sussex to Bellicombe, has barged the Huang Ho, mule-trained the Gobi, yet he knows all of space is a veil without a seam. Though now he looks from his museum window at the cedars along the Jardin des Plantes, again Paris in autumn, his favorite season, his specimens on shelves in the room next door, books, oak desk, a prospect of widening scope of mind, planetary, sky-bent, like that antelope horn, pearled, spiraling. And the last one I'll read from this first section is called False. I am the scandal inside the rock, the mist in bronze that makes the sculptor turn his hand, amend his eye, to find in stone's intended flesh the fortunate flaw. I am the droplet mote of fog that sways and knocks the pomegranate's alchemies about, diffusing them to randomness, out of which anneals the very fruit. I am the fabric's warp and woof, double life of loss and growth, loss again, the passing names by which each furthered world reveals its life and knows its death. I am the thread that webs itself through every maze, till I become the maze itself, and the walker there, who mindfully, blindly, solely gropes the iron veil. I am the stuttered origin, the gene-inflected molecule, conjuring futures from the acid soup, purposeless, until this driven, fraught machine divines the word. I am the soldier's fall in each attack, the fatal block that hides the manifold, inevitable, original, here, endless, till no man suffers into promised land. So, for eschatology, let this man descend the cave, the cavern of beginnings below his own Dordogne, to run his mind along that frieze of first imaginaries, the prey, the prime extinctions on the boss's fold and fault. He thinks, by means of all created things, the divine assails us, molds us. With that assault, I am. So the second movement, I guess you could call it, it's kind of orchestral thing, is called At the End of Distances. All these titles of the sections are actually stolen from Wallace Stevens. Here it's voiced by people he knew. So the first one is called Hands, and it's in the voice of a man called George Barber, who worked with Teilhard de Chardin in China. Chardin was basically banished to do his work in China for 25 years or so, and was refused any publication during his lifetime by the Catholic Church. He eventually became very famous in his lifetime, after his death. Hands. To fall forward stage by stage to the end of the world, that's what he would say, my old friend with his kit box and breviary, his pack of jobs, him chain smoking them year in, year out, from Tianjin to Transvaal, field notes and skulls, his eyes keen for every jigsaw bit of bone, Sinanthropus, Australopithecus, Miocene, Pleistocene, all the way to this latter infancy, this thinking envelope of consciousness expanding he held like a living net, one mind woven with all minds, drawn to the ahead. At Chukutien, I'd use crayons to track sediment with colors on my notepad. He would keep gradations like prisms in his head, drawing sharp as photographs. Nights, at the fire, we would talk of his god of tension that carries the species on to every random spur, like that time on the steps of the Yamen when a mule struck him with his hind leg on the temple, the blister the size of a bloody pigeon's egg. He quoted Li Po. It's as hard to travel to Sichuan as to climb to heaven. And when my son died, near his own death, he wrote, I am convinced what looks like meaningless catastrophe transforms itself into blessing. And even those graves at Sing Ling, no stones, no names. Look at the hands, spit painted on cave walls as if raised to brace a fall. No, they're moving. They're making their way through rock. This is called Fig. It's in the voice of the cardinal that banished Thierry Chardin and refused him any publication in his lifetime. I resigned myself to the activity of a microbe, he said, with the exile, the silencing, the 20-year stretch in China, tending as rocks, caches of bones and tools, navigating across a lifetime of more tools, more bones, the work of well-intended speculation, fairly samizdat. I shall swallow the obstacle in the act of my obedience. One must credit his faith, but our Holy Father saw best. I know Teilhard is a great scientist, but no theologian to resolve the problem of God. There is no problem. The crux. He presumes God a contingent cause, limited thus by his own creation, evolving with it, as it were, and sin from the first little more than a necessary flaw, more animal than original, a belated Pelagian gold that heads sometime ahead with our long emergence. And St. Paul's Christ like a cosmic strange attractor that draws unto itself, already holy, the whole universe. Consider for sin and heresy then the milieu of a fig. The garden's fatal fruit, he believed, an exemplary tale, a figure for our fallible nature, transfigured over time. Alpha Lord by matters turns to Hierophant Omega. Inside the fig is an inner realm of hothouse blossoms, the fig's own world and telos, into which the fig wasp crawls to lay its eggs, only enough so both might live, lest the tree reject them. But the fig is not a fruit. No. And this is in the voice of Teilhard's sister, who died quite young. When I read the draft of his milieu, I knew the mirror of my life in his had found new life in it. That sickness never comes to diminish, but quickens God's own life in us in God's life. As he reflects, death's the sum of all our diminishments, though we overcome death by finding God in it. And so it was for Albrecht, Louise, for Francois, Gabriel, for us all, and my own affliction a kind of brute spectacle that begets the inner flowering that was my life at Sarsenat, as the Sacred Heart blazed in the foyer, as it did when we were children. My body bedridden 30 years, my life is dreamt imitatio Christi, while my dear brother crisscross continents, unlayeringly errant, arrow to my base on a compass rose. As in De Hook's imagined Delft, two figures travel in mirror passages, one away from, one into the light, or like mirror particles, chiral, contrarily handed, light again invariant, until its symmetry shatters ahead, so it is in this looking glass world of scattered entanglements. When I died, it was as though he was looking at Earth from an immense distance, blue atmosphere, the green of vegetation, then ever more luminous, thought itself, then ever deeper, the darkness of suffering, growing sharper with consciousness, the widening inflorescence, and God gazing in at the flung reflections. Teilhard was very optimistic about the world. I'm not so sure I'm quite as optimistic as Teilhard, but this is in the voice of somebody who was not so optimistic as Teilhard and argued with Teilhard often about matters, and it's the philosopher Gabriel Marcel. This is called Labyrinth. What did my rival call them, this host of living forms? A labyrinth, incoherent, a maze of births and deaths, ontogeny, phylogeny, until one perceives the thread he called love, at the heart of the universe, not sentiment, but activity, with its groping into mind. And with human mind, the creation climbing on ahead. Provided a summit exists, and it is worth the climb, what mountaineer, he believed, would risk a fall? Humans to be human must try everything in the end. I balked at his Nietzschean metaphors, his Promethean Christ, his eclipses of God, and brooked the doctors of Dachau as counterman to his flimsier figurations, as if spirit could be wrung from a rabid consciousness. Yet I too believed in humanity on the way, unbound to wishful nets of furtherance, and founded on hope of the present moment, like a sudden clearing opening in communion with another. Take from my labyrinth this very now as the floor before you, 11 circuits woven into quadrants, and step into its foliate cross as if it were the outward print of your own itineracy. And let the center draw you to itself, its 6 rosettes, the soul of your awakening, approached, departed. Spiral bonds of snail shells, galaxies, blood and brain, a cast of the great rose window, and our heroine. And I'll finish with a couple of pieces from the last section, which is called Like Glitter Ascended into Fire. And the speaker in this section is the poet. And it's addressed to Teilhard as though Teilhard was hearing the poet's confession, which is what happens in Catholic Church. He said, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned," and off you go. Right? So, I'll just read a couple of sections from here. The choice is ours, you believe. Suicide or adoration established the moment something altered the current, like a river enriched, you said, by contact with the plane, until the vital flux, now alluvial, crosses to reflection, and what manifests to form is the enormous headlong bloom of planetary mind, our monstrous inflorescence pushing forward. Even the frailest, smallest, pitiable thing risen by coincidence is provident, the fiat of the whole woven through the manifold. So, what of our far-flung marching throng, ill-starred disaster, or promised goal toward which the living arrow flies from one extinction to the next? Cambrian, Ordovician, Permian, Eocene, Miocene, the way of things. Great tusked woolly fauna fell at our own pending hands, cast out. The last ox strangled on Elbe. No one is an island, John Donne, but the main is. I hear lost worlds sing inside the rock. Desiccated corals, bat middens in the cave of Aeolus. This by now long-swelling, surging flood of overkill. Father, I grow stone-eyed before the glut of rainforest, hacked, burned, evaporating glaciers, methane strayed from permafrost. This wrong way road from a maze. How to rise ahead amidst the sundering, heaving waste, and you, most faithful, chiding our path to total death. The elephants dwindling, also mourn their dead at kick graves. Still, I would see with you life's long spiral unscathed, irreversible, evolutive logos, and we, like leaves, buds from which everything appears in its proper place and time. Your nod to the origin, its great living tree, and suffering an ascensional force, drawing our ends forward, the crucified's Vitruvian arms outreached, through all matter to the farthest corners of creation. But the figure's not a tree, it's a trellis for us humans. Our bloodlines from mitochondrial Eve recombinant, and the finer features of our within deeply wound is something like a tapestry or some intricate mosaic, proving the bard's trope of one containing multitudes, admixtures of others, each other, our inner alchemy threading back to beginning, singular black hole of our arrival, brought to presence with what comes. Corn from grass, tool in hand from the image of a tool in mind, the kinship of things that do not look akin. Why then this history? Star clusters, spearhead rotes, the very gene suppressed by the strong man, simian dreams spun by force of luck, the crosses crooked, another knee on the neck, another future broken. I look to the solace of bone flutes, lion men carved in mammoth tusks, and to the silenced ones, stone circles, eagle talon jewelry in the more ancient caves. Thank you.
Well, hello everybody.
Hi.
Thank you so much, Brookline Booksmith and Bonnie, and thank you all for being here. I'm going to read to you first from my book, Pearl Diver of Irunmani, which is kind of an exploration of consciousness. I nearly died about 4 years ago, and this is kind of this is called Stories Seen in the Carvings. 1. Whose eyes are closed. Slow beginnings, early mornings, as clouds disperse, the sky unravels. Ahead voices wrap around trees, nudging streams and whispers. What is the color of water now? A great solidarity dwells in light, and in spare branches, eternity finds a sound. The clacking of nail on wood, and in the fog, with snowing leaves. The breeze, a sniffle, a cloth of light descends. 2. The concealed motors of narrative. Aren't we made of light, both ahead and behind? Dawnbreak. The furnace burns, the frame served on a door. Fevered speech. I would die if I were a rodent. What a climate to come home to. What should move ahead or through? Heed the words and dream them, creature. Wavering daybreak, from where black reigned alone, knotted brows sipping old wine, tangled in the future thought of, as if something we call flint might ink all this into infinity. And a train passes, sounding like a predatory creature seeking out a distant life. Together we are encased, enclosed in a photograph, a reel that unwinds on pillowcases, blithely saying, touch me, and the frond of a leaf or a petal, innocently living inside, says, let me stop you too. That rising up through storm and weave, clearly executed, seems to explore in a single together. So then, why look back, my love? 3. Intensive care unit. Vaguely abysmal, this city, though our earthly architect did his very best. Something's amiss. The rattle of the furnace, the hum of the vent, sends that hollow howl through the inside of the room, where another kind of snow, a night snow, follows childhood paths, as in the purest form, the ruse of a wandering life. Slant veil of light mist across hilltops now. Words dressed with lemon and mint float inside the mind, and the partnership wanders through caverns of absentee bats. The silken sky plunges toward the shore, where swollen seabirds dart and dangle, and the waves' white eye stares on, A seamless pattern dapples the sands, sifting through light to retrace our fading tracks. This one's called First Astronaut on Jupiter. The glisten, listen, globular collusion, that crackle in awe at the waves of peroxide frothing, snorting across the shore. A ring of stones immersed in a spiral of silence on fields of ice, to be the very first stone. And the sunlight faintly steals like a fox behind another ring of stones. Your heart is torn as a fleeting moment of fire burns the atmosphere from this Milky Way of young souls. But where, you ask, is the driftwood picking up on the shore? And the surge of the sluggish river winds down, slowing vapors, shadows. Listen, you can hear the years sifting through the bedrock, falling into the bottom of ourselves, while the earth thrusts quietly ahead, and the murmur of her forest at night, and the hollow wails of air, the calls of the drunken dove, the ticking of ants moving their cities halfway across the world. And still, as dragon clouds, these dawn waters, this land of untouched snows. And this one's called Oil Sheen. Driving into desert country along the straight-tracked man-made road. Ahead, the canyon billows dust smoke. Words tremble in the lobe. An old melody whirs deep in the bone. Light rises, or an illusion of it. Ahead, the field of weed wavers, lingers. Rusting water silos with perched crows. Serpents snaking somewhere below. And the carcass of a hillside emotionally reflects the mountains. Yes, shade, but where the underlying matter? And where is that fresh water we saved for this evening? Meteor showers. And as the dream reaches out toward us, darkness falls again. A wheel spins in the unknown engine. At the end of the hall, a figure of a man arrested in a murmur of voices. That man is carved stone, facing ocean. Summer's surface, crackling in its gnarled edges and warm kinks. We slip through the noose of home and prance out into the white sails of the big outdoors, where insects are performing in their wholesome blue. Cosmic impulse. She tells me how ocean is the memory of all things, thought, thinking, considered, how the sea seethes in its impulse to capture each fleeting instinct, to transmute thought into sidereal time. And now we get a little philosophical, or more philosophical. To discover Descartes. To discover the discarded, the forgotten, or once purveyed, in part toxic, the heart of a word slithering towards small truths under a starry sky, and those 1,000 eyes of mammalian longing go to sleep among the scavengers and predators, but alive in the dark, obliterated in the pavilions of the insects, in the wake of pollen and fragrance, everything filled in and used, but barely used up. The sparkles that catch the light of the passing cars or trucks carting consciousness, or perhaps, more aptly, a self-consciousness edging toward the warmth of morning. Fantastic to feel how the earth grows back into itself, pushing itself back toward the past, toward the ocean like a memory, transmuted, or a deep loneliness caving in on itself, where everything is water, where everything sinks. This one's called Warm Waters. Went to sleep for hours until I heard the footsteps in the hall downstairs. The cat scratched the door for 15 seconds, then the battle in the mind. Outside, in the garden, someone else slept. It rained in my hands, and a huge tree laden with moss filled my head. Stubborn creature, you whistled over my bed, and me, with my stuck-together eyes, I rose from the dead, and you pulled me gently into the light, and with loose fingers stirred whirlpools. Hear the fragment to the kiss, caught on camera years ago, right there under your birthmark, beneath your cheekbone, in that space you called rigidity, and the warmth that rose from the pit of your guts in a wave of red, that blush of contentment, an impossible rhetoric, the splinter of a white life well known, to rise from the underworld and reach the frontier all aglare in the faces of friends and foes, reading in between the lines the hypnosis of hydroponics and the lined up ancient monkey heads, the goats, nose against panes, the ridged horns clanking on glass, and the windows bursting wide. Darkness hanging deep down, are all moving parts transparent, asleep at the wheel. We are sycamore trees, all fingers stretching into a sky. We are paths, traveled, warmed perhaps on horseback. Perhaps we walk the solemn and absurd on all fours, and all the tracks, the trails we drag through the melting snow, through this oh so hallowed ground. Let's see. This one's called City Lights, and it's dedicated to Charlie Chaplin and Emily Dickinson. Dare I say the labyrinth was in her, the path memorized like choral verses from childhood. She glanced down toward the assembled, hoping she too might impart what she knew. A lifetime taught her a little less than half, reflected in her laughter, strained at best. She imagined him as a lighthouse in a maelstrom of cross currents, of unpredictable shallows, pure tomfoolery. Of course, thinking of her own symbolic discoveries as to the illuminations, a faint roar deep in her inner ear told her something wants to be known. To her, though, words meant little anymore. Electric the channels of runoff, twisting through the once primordial forest, and the smoke emerges from funnels, spilling out words into the sky. Please don't die. Calm consideration requires just the margins of a newspaper, something dragged under the noses of authorities in their paralyzing pinstripes. Who lectures on death anyway? It's all about the dying, or those stasis chambers frozen cryogenic in the chorus of the patriarch, the wind that bellows in its incontinent rain, or sister snail in her slow skate across the melting ice of uneven waters. Present is this island, the cracking face of a perpetual cold. We remember her still, even though all the dark clouds in her chipped tiles, when people were carried by a wave through their generous ghettos and found their fates along the barriers of truth. Could we walk along the alleys singing, waving our masks among machines of virtue and vice, spreading our salt fondly and intrepid through curved space? Eventually, the cold will hit her eyes, and just for a second she will see her other face, boldly clearing the way down to the waterfront. A deathly quiet pervades the memory. A pause or pauses in succession, as if a frigid chill vibrates deep in the bones, as if a master lies, claps his hands, or rubs them against each other, as brother clasping brother, a knowing hinted at, a reaping of dead skin cells, and then the illimitable silence that once was breaks, flies apart, as if the memory may only be an imagined past, or the word abused in context is nothing. That's one of those strange moments that happens in the supermarket sometimes. Karma. How the birds have stopped singing. How the green has become grey. How your last words resonate. This is the very thing you are. A short note from the heart. I could still hear his laughs from where, while reading at the kitchen lamp, the night was windowless, and the words split apart as the housefly drilled into the cracks. But there was grace here in its silent voluptuousness, bearing down upon my breast like an ocean, ignorant, old, and preserving. And hunched, I walked the narrow passage into the dreams of my dreams, afraid of what it meant to be orphaned, to be departed, or the money spent on acquiring identity and the light that louvers in the I do, in the shuffling of thought between the latter and the former, and the fate of family, or the smell of consequence in all its sizes, flooded in impartial stares. How the nearsighted cloud in the pane has little fear of the unknown, and the illusion of will in the small, gentle order recalls the belligerent, the delinquent, the crushed genes of atomic time, where such small quarry was the pastime of lesser gods, of forest spirits or water friar, where the sky falls away and we were reborn again every second Sunday among the birds. And here a last poem from another collection, which is unfortunately not on sale here today because it came out in Australia. But this one is called The Last Descendant. In the not too distant future, in some distant sun system, the engines of the economy will go silent. On lunar holidays, the consortium will meet to discuss soft matters, wafer-thin trinkets of colored glass, the red moon on the horizon, the gentle moss-covered hills with their panoply of shimmering beetles. They will celebrate the union at the source, the wind and water dust, the hanging foxes in the caverns of Pantoum, or the life-giving lodgings awake in song and reverie. You won't understand until you start hearing it, the heartbeats of the night blossoms and their attending creatures who recite poetry behind the old people's home. Among the 100 eyes at dinner time, behold the paprika sprinkled on a cinnamon river. Watch the U-birds rise, strumming the grasslands in their plumes. It has been said that all is done for, that the world no longer holds. For a while, some places glow in harmony. Still others, with their torches and magnets, will blemish the way. And just who is this obstinate group who simply hands over their skins? Thank you.
Thank you both for your beautiful reading. And now it is our audience's turn to shine. We're going to begin the Q&A. You don't have to come up. I saw like someone panic. It's our Q&A portion. So just raise your hand and I'll call on folks, and our wonderful poets will answer. Yeah, go right ahead.
Daniel.
Yes. But it's really interesting. I very recently finished a collection of well, I call them poems, but they're actually called the collection is called Anti-Antiques. And it's by Brookline Booksmith. And it's like the interaction kind of explains his idea of what an anti-poem is in a poem. It's not a concept. It is as antimatter is to matter. So, like I forgot whether he was a physicist or a physicist, but he was very interested in science and like how it sort of complemented this sort of like art of language and communication that he did. And his anti-poem collection was kind of like tongue-in-cheek. But I can't help but sort of see his sort of concept interesting as yours, because when you're with the like people from whom isn't business is told, you mentioned their scientific kind of interest as well as their religious sort of thing as well. And religion and science are very, very often paired as opposites, but they're not really. And I was just wondering if you could expand on that other thing, like what sort of thing connects the scientific practice to like this creation of poetry to the logical kind of narration story thing. And then
That's a very complicated question in the sense that you're hitting right to the core of it. I mean, it seems to me that is exactly what this book is exploring. In all three instances, George Lemaitre, the first one I didn't read from, was the first person to conceptualize the beginning of the universe in an explosive singularity, Big Bang. And he was called the Big Bang Man by someone named Fred Hoyle, who was a steady state theorist. And it was originally a mocking term. Now we use that term all the time. But he was also obviously someone who, one might say, was primed to be ready to see that perhaps the universe began in a beginning of some kind. He himself would refuse to confuse religion and science. He was a very serious scientist and a brilliant mathematician. And he got pissed off, frankly, at the Pope, when Pope Pius XII immediately said, well, we've now proven that, the world emerges from nothing and God did it. And Lemaitre said he was furious with this, and was infuriated with the Pope and even cursed his students, not his students, but he cursed the Pope with the students. He was unhappy with that. So the whole book is really exploring the tension between those two possible versions of how things begin and finding the intersections between them. And in fact, I use at one point the metaphor of matter and antimatter with reference to Lemaitre in his attempt to kind of hold together contrary visions of reality, the scientific and the religious, broadly speaking. So yeah.
Yeah, for the author of the Pearl Diver, you mentioned that you had a near-death experience about 4 years ago, How did that influence your work, and has that influence changed as more time has passed since the event?
Yeah, what I had 4 years ago was something called thyroid storm, which basically you're in hyperthyroidism on an elevated degree. When they took me into the hospital, my heart rate was 220. And initially they thought a heart transplant, no, but they figured out it was the thyroid. They got that down, but my heart was then in AFib. And, anyway, it took a long while to get everything back to normal. As a result, I spent so many days in the hospital thinking about, the whole spectrum of my life, and through Pearl Diver, where of course the metaphor is that you're actually diving for that pearl of knowledge or that pearl of wisdom to get you on through life, kind of appeared to me in those periods, and I just followed the journey. It's a very oceanic book. Almost every poem has some kind of pelagic influence, and I guess that maybe is sort of the kind of background thought of perhaps going back to be in the sack, in the womb, with that salty warm water rushing about you. Anyway, that's how it came about. Thank you.
I had a question for Mark, which is that you have a very incredibly diverse background, and just wondering how that played into your poetry, or is it what made you a poet? Or?
I started writing poetry probably when I was about 15 or 16, having first, actually written songs with local bands and things like that. But then took a course in high school, which kind of set me on the trail. And so yes, I've been writing poetry since about that time, and very conscious listening to song and language. Of course, you probably know that I have many languages, and I'm national as well. So I'm very conscious and unconscious of the use of different languages in my work. And translation also kind of gives you another ear. So I suppose all of these things have influenced me tremendously in my writing.
And then, this is our last question.
I have a question on dimensions. I forget what section it was in, but there was a line that we're molded by the divine. Do you think that anyone is ever immune to this? Being molded by it and to two-parter? And if so, is this ever preferable than not being molded than being molded? Is there any instance in which that's better?
Well, you're asking me to see into the mind of God there. Kind of a big question. In terms of what the poem is doing, it's 3 poems, but it's really a long design. All the poems are 24 lines long. All of them are in tercets, 3-line stanzas. The last 11 are in terza rima. So in terms of molding, I think what the poem is doing, and what I'm trying to do, is face up to that notion of whether there is something that is beyond our own intentions, singular intentions in the shaping of the world. Obviously, our intentions are part of the shaping of the world. But is there a larger patterning that goes beyond us? So someone like Teilhard would be very much the case, yes, there is, and we can't see where these things are evolving. He's very much future directed. I didn't read from the Simone Weil part, but she believed that there was more reality in the past than in the present and in the future. So that is intentionally why I chose her work, her life really, to explore, because she's going in exactly the opposite direction. She believes we are in effect becoming less molded as we evolve. It's our evolution for Simone Weil is a kind of actual devolution, spiritually speaking. So, can I give you the answer to that question? My stance is yes, but is that something that I could identify with and point out to as a nugget, bring it out, a star, gem? Here it is. No, of course not. We're all on the way, and we try to make sense of these things as best we can for ourselves in conversation with many, many, many different cultural perspectives on these ultimate questions. These are ultimate questions. Marc's poems are, I think, I found a lot of resonance between Marc and I. In fact, Labyrinth, Spirals, I saw a lot of the same images. We didn't plan that. We just kind of have a natural, we may be twin sons of different mothers now that I think about it. I don't know. That's a great question. I wish I could answer you definitively. My answer in terms of faith, yes, I think there is something beyond us. I think our little square of reality is probably pretty narrow when all comes said and done, although it seems like the great vast universe right before us is probably just a small bit of it.